On a muggy afternoon thick with haze, one typical of Ohio's summer of 1990, aviation's weirdest and most surprising sight appeared out of the skies over Dayton International Airport. For the first time off a military base, the stealth fighter showed its face to the public. This was the angular radar-evading attack aircraft steeped in secrecy for almost 15 years and unveiled for the first time in battle over Panama 7 months earlier. Now it was on the Airshow circuit, and the U.S. Air and Trade Show at Dayton was among the first stops. And as they gawked at it the next day, displayed on a taxiway among more commonly seen airshow participants, little did the crowd know that they were seeing a future war hero. The airplane that, some would say, single-handedly paved the way for the quick and decisive win in America's first major war since Vietnam. It was a new kind of war, with a new kind of hero, just now being seen for the first time. In this program, you'll see the spectacle, flying drama, and hardware that makes air shows so popular and gave so many people insight into the future flying battlefield of the Gulf War. About 400 air shows in the U.S. each year draw roughly 20 million people, a crowd draw second only to Major League Baseball. From charity fundraiser air shows to the grandest major business shows, a big part of the crowd comes to see the flying, often showing the latest in airplanes and hinting of things to come. In Dayton, the U.S. Air and Trade Show, one of hundreds of aviation gatherings each year around the United States, brings a large turnout from Western Ohio and around the world. Local community and business leaders created the Dayton Air Show almost 20 years ago, thinking that there ought to be a major aviation event in the town that gave us the brothers who invented the airplane. Soviet MiG-29s helped draw the crowd to Dayton in that summer of 1990. It was the first tour of the top-of-the-line Soviet fighter in the U.S. The airplane, developed in the late 1970s, has a high thrust-to-weight ratio, can be armed with the latest in heat and radar-guided missiles, and is similar in size and performance to the U.S. F/A-18 operated by the Navy and Marines. The Soviets started pushing the airplane heavily in 1988, including use of a promotional film at international shows.
It is easy to fly the plane.
Ironically, it was early that same year that the first squadrons of MiG-29s were delivered to Saddam Hussein in Iraq. The MiG-29 first appeared publicly outside the Soviet Union at the Farnborough, England Air Show in 1988. The sharply honed skills and instincts of test pilots make them especially adept in demonstrating new aircraft. And Anatoly Kovachev, a test pilot for the Soviet Mikoyan Design Bureau, was doing the flying. His remarkable tail slide, demanding for the pilot and engines of a high-performance jet and flown at low altitude, earned him attention and respect.
Vertical maneuver is not very difficult for our pilots on our aircraft. And we hope that all pilots will to do that maneuver.
At the Paris Air Show a year later, Kovachev flew again and truly proved his mettle, punching out only seconds before his MiG-29 crashed on the opening day of the show. He punched out none too soon. A bit over 2 seconds before the airplane hit, his parachute fully opened when he was only a few feet above ground. Again, as the airplane hit, you can see the left engine, carrying power to impact, explodes a last gasp of fiery thrust as the airplane crumples into the grass. The cause of the accident? Damage to the right engine earlier in the flight when birds were sucked into the engine. Now at Dayton, the airplane was back in the air, with MiG Chief Test Pilot Valery Minitsky at the controls, and the flying was better than ever.
200 knots as it goes through this maneuver. The power does come back for the Cobra maneuver. There it is! 90 degrees. to about 105 degrees. The nose goes forward. You saw it here first.
Like most air shows, Dayton offered glimpses into the future. Two aerospace consortiums had built prototypes in an Air Force contract competition. A video of the YF-23A from Northrop and McDonnell Douglas was shown at Dayton. And a Lockheed General Dynamics Boeing design, the YF-22, was unveiled to the public a few weeks later. Both airplanes are the most innovative in fighter technology, one of which would become the Air Force fighter for the 21st century. The Dayton crowd also got a look at the futuristic XV-15 tilt rotor, precursor to the Bell-Boeing V-22 Osprey. Military and airline executives alike see the Osprey as a revolutionary way to move people without traditional runways.
As he's making his turn, you can see the rotors come back into vertical mode. He will come back and land as a helicopter.
For a lot of spectators, though, the future can wait. They've come just for the flying fun. The aerobatic flying that evolved from the barnstormer era of the 1920s and 1930s, with its stunts, wing walkers, loops, rolls, and thrills, still becomes the afternoon's focus of attention at most aviation events. One of the featured acts at Dayton and at dozens of other shows each year is the Holiday Inn team, flying 4 Pitts aerobatic biplanes. T.J. Brown, a former Air Force fighter pilot, is the team leader.
We fly about 100 performances a year, up to about 25 sites, different locations. And during that time, we'll get about 300 to 350 hours of flying time. About half of that is in cross-country flying, and the other half of it, of course, is in the hard aerobatic flying and press work that we do. I think our type of flying is really difficult because each of the pilots has such a concentration requirement. The wingmen have to look totally at the leader and while they're flying their aircraft and are not looking in the direction that they're going. They have to do this under all kinds of G-loads while they're experiencing weights up to about 1,000 pounds. And also they have to do this in full trust that the leader is not going to hit the ground because their peripheral vision picks up the ground going by even though they're not watching the ground. Whereas the leader has to fly as if he's flying all 4 airplanes at the same time, concentrating on not making the airplane do something that would be impossible for the wingman to follow. So the whole idea of flying in formation is one of total trust and confidence amongst each other while you're under a tremendous athletic strain.
The maneuvers flown by airshow pilots often create G-load stresses that match those endured by fighter pilots in air combat maneuvers.
2 of our pilots are in their 30s and the other 2 of us are in our 40s. And the athletic aspect of it is certainly very real. The amount of stress on our bodies simulates running a jackhammer. As a result, we try to keep in good physical condition, watch what we eat, and of course we do participate in some competitive athletic events amongst ourselves while we're on the road to keep ourselves in shape. I think the most exciting maneuvers that we do are the ones where we start with the airplanes in formation and then break them apart, either vertically or down, and then bring them back together very quickly. And the ability to do that quickly is always fascinating to the audience, and it is to us too. It's all choreographed, just like you would on a stage, of how you bring dancers apart and together. And that kind of maneuver, particularly what we call our up bomb burst, in which we go to all 4 different directions, and then bringing them back together, that maneuver is one of my very favorites.
Formation flying is refined to the highest degree by the world's major military demonstration teams, including the Navy's Blue Angels and the Air Force Thunderbirds. Major Tim Hoy is Thunderbird 8, the team narrator and advance man.
Well, our show, I tell you, we're geared to trying to excite the crowd, but then we're also trying to educate the crowd. And then we're trying to show them, demonstrate the skill of the people who are flying the airplanes, and then we're also trying to demonstrate the capabilities of a frontline fighter like the F-16. And so, to a degree, the fighter itself with the noise, the tight turns, the maneuvering that it can do, if people are just used to seeing general aviation and not seeing jet fighters out there, they're just going to be intrigued by the capabilities of an airplane an airplane to be able to accelerate going straight up, to roll and do loops and do an inverted pass, with, if you will, at 150 feet. Those type of things, although we don't do day to day as fighter pilots, it's very amazing to see the skill demonstrated by a pilot to do an inverted pass the length of the show line at 150 feet.
You won't find big jet teams in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You will find, though, aviation's extremes in creativity and technology, plus a huge mix of antiques, restored warplanes from the past, and a bit of everything else that flies. The Experimental Aircraft Association convention, over 7 days in late July, draws the largest collection of airplanes to any one place in the world. And with about 750,000 visitors to the show, it ranks at the top of all annual crowd attractions. New aircraft designs, often by unknown builders, sometimes show up and may represent the precursors of aeronautical concepts to be applied years or decades later. For this crowd, a special attraction this year was the stealth fighter, the F-117A, continuing its limited airshow engagements. Those who saw the airplane here had a lot more to talk about when the airplane proved itself again and again over Baghdad 6 months later. Tom Poberezny, president of the association and chairman of the convention.
Well, as far as making a good air show, here at Oshkosh we have two types of audiences. One is the pilot or the pilot group, and the other is the general public. And as a pilot, I'm always proud of the fact that when I can demonstrate my skills, or what we call precision flying, to fellow pilots who can appreciate the little things. As far as the public is concerned, it's strictly entertainment. They enjoy the noise, the smoke, the quick movements, whatever the case may be.
A French couple, Montaigne Millet and Danielle Heligon, are one of the closest flying and graceful teams on the show circuit, performing together for almost 15 years.
We started an aerobatic school, and Daniel started to do the air show solo. I was with him, and he started to train me little by little. We kept doing it because we loved it. It's just a story of love. You know, more you do it, more you want to perfect it. And then you start working on more details and more details. There's so many little things that is going to make, you change what time you're going to put your smoke on, how you're going to do your turn, where you're going to do your turn, how you're going to do it, what bank, or where the position of the aircraft is going to be. And people are going to say, oh, gee, you changed this here. Oh, you're doing something wonderful. There's very little change. It's like move of a dancer. And a good choreographer is going to make the same ballet 10,000 better than somebody else just by changing the move of the dancer. And that's what we try to do.
They are mirror image maneuvers, with their airplanes back to back as close as just a few feet apart, are especially dramatic.
Well, a lot of people are a little bit concerned about the mirror image. Just before I go upside down, I check my oil pressure and my fuel pressure. Also, our aircraft are very well maintained. So before I go upside down, I know my aircraft is running correctly, and I'm trusting it for 45 seconds. Well, when we fly, I guess because we're the two of us, it's a little bit like making love, you know. Sometimes it works out, it's wonderful, you have a sense of satisfaction. Sometimes it just, well, you know, hope it'll be better next time, it just didn't work. And when we fly, it's a little bit of the same.
But for those serious about aviation who come to Oshkosh, the pretty show flying is a sidelight. What's new or old is what's important. Relics from the past, like a 50-year-old DC-3 or a 35-year-old Constellation, may show up on a first tour after complete restoration. Replicas and restorations from aviation's earliest years present a flying history. And almost as large an air armada of World War II vintage fighters and bombers as might have invaded Europe in 1943 flies over Oshkosh. You'll find the occasional privately owned MiG-21 at Oshkosh, going through the paces for the show crowd, even as the Iraqi Air Force was preparing its active-duty MiG-21s for war. Technology from the past, present, and future blend seamlessly at this show, where over 1,500 airplanes are on display. The very easies are an early design from Bert Rutan, a guru of the home-built aircraft movement. He later created the Voyager, which is the only airplane ever to fly around the world non-stop on one fuel load. He also designed the Starship, a business plane now manufactured by Beech. Rutan's latest project, zipping through the Oshkosh skies, called the Ares, is a proposed Air Force attack aircraft. And the Air Force is giving this project with Oshkosh roots serious consideration. But of course, the focal point for 1990 at Oshkosh and the few other events where it appeared remained the F-117A stealth fighter. You could see it, but not touch or even get too close. Not much was said, and the pilots and crews wouldn't talk. Speculation abounded, and world events were taking a turn even as the show went on. In a few days, the F-117As would be prepared to leave for Saudi Arabia, and in a few months, answers and facts would be more apparent than anyone would have imagined. No stealth fighters came to Farnborough, England, where 1990's largest aerospace trade event took place in early September. Most instead headed for the Middle East. The rumblings of war were apparent. A massive airlift of military hardware and armies was underway. And 6 Navy carriers were being positioned on all sides of the Kuwaiti theater of operations. Entertainment is a small part of a show like Farnborough. Military aircraft prevail. The Soviets continued to expose their aircraft technology to the West, and as usual, a strong complement of fighters and strike airplanes showed their prowess. Returning for a second time to Farnborough, the Soviet MiG-29 flew often, with MiG chief test pilot Valery Minitsky demonstrating a tail slide, first shown to the public in the MiG-29 at Farnborough in 1988. David North, the managing editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine, and a Navy fighter pilot in Vietnam, had flown a MiG-29 at Kubinka Air Base inside the Soviet Union 7 months earlier. He was the first journalist to fly that fighter. Only in the past year had Soviet fighters been flown by Westerners, an indication of the Soviets' eagerness to expose their airplanes and technology to the outside world. Now at the Farnborough show, he got his shot at flying the other top-of-the-line Soviet fighter, the Sukhoi 27. North took the front seat. Viktor Pugachev sat in back as safety pilot. Pugachev is the chief test pilot for the Sukhoi Design Bureau, the Soviets' design and manufacturing arm for this and many other airplanes. First unveiled at Paris the year before, the Sukhoi 27 is the largest fighter in the Soviet Air Force with remarkable power and agility. The 65-foot-long airplane with 41-foot wingspan can carry 8 air-to-air missiles and is driven by 2 turbine engines, each capable of 30,000 pounds thrust. They flew over the English countryside, generally at altitudes of around 15,000 feet for about an hour. North found the airplane, with its computerized fly-by-wire controls, to have agility and crispness of control more like that found in smaller jets. Controls and instrumentation was dated compared to fighters from the U.S. And while it had most of the weapon systems common to Western aircraft, it did so with comparatively crude and bulky electronics packages. But regardless of the workings of the airplane, the Cobra maneuver, which Pugachev had introduced in Paris a year earlier, remained the showstopper. At 2,000 feet, with power set to 85% at a cruise speed of 220 knots, Pugachev yanks on the stick and gets the aircraft's nose arced backwards to as much as 130 degrees. Aerodynamic pressure brings the airplane, slowed by over 100 knots, back to level flight. Aircraft that embodied the latest in technology and innovation showed off for the crowds during the Farnborough flying displays. The Antonov AN-225, a Soviet aircraft, ranks as the largest airplane in the world. It first flew about a year and a half earlier with its wingspan about the length of a football field, 6 powerful jet engines, and 32 tires to roll on. Its vertical tail fins, almost 3 stories tall. It can take off at a loaded weight of about 1.3 million pounds. A Soviet designer explained to an American visitor that the AN-225 could carry over 60 Cadillacs. And at the 1991 Paris show, the Soviets revealed a plan to fit an AN-225 for passenger flights, with seating for 830 people in a multi-deck layout. A helicopter with no tail rotor, the Bell McDonnell Douglas MD-530 Notar, came to Farnborough for the first time as well. This helicopter concept, still in the testing stages, relies on vectored thrust from its jet engine to counteract the torque effects from the main engine. The technology was part of a bid to build the Army's next light attack helicopter, the LHX. But a Boeing Sikorsky model with an enclosed tail rotor won the contract a few months later. Most visitors to Farnborough didn't know it at the time, but they were also seeing the major air combatants currently assembling for a war over Iraq and Kuwait. Thunderous and impressive, the Dassault Breguet Mirage 2000, a French fighter with dramatic high and low speed maneuvering ability, and now classic Delta design, would join in the Gulf War as part of France's show of force in the skies over Iraq. This single-engine, single-pilot fighter interceptor first went into service with the French Air Force in 1983. The Mirage 2000-5 model, which flew in the 1990 Farnborough Airshow, features the newest in cockpit displays, radar technology, and computerized operating system. The airplane can fly at over Mach 2.2 and features an exceptional initial rate of climb of over 50,000 feet per minute. The Soviet MiG-29, the latest fighter in Iraq's Air Force, went through the paces over England. The airplane's high degree of maneuverability had been repeatedly demonstrated at flying displays outside the Soviet Union. While the airplane's flight controls are operated by a less sophisticated mechanical system, Western experts who've evaluated its flying characteristics report the airplane in many ways matches US and Europe's best, and pilot competence would be the deciding factor in a fight. During Desert Storm, at least 8 of them would be shot down in air combat, and dozens more would scamper to Iran. The Panavia Tornado, a fighter built jointly by companies in Britain, Germany, and Italy, would be one of the key attackers in the Gulf War, flown by the Royal Air Force to attack Iraqi airfields and disable runways with cluster bombs. The Tornado, carrying a crew of 2, has variable sweep wings. The Royal Air Force would soon send 3 different Tornado models to the Gulf: 42 strike attack aircraft, 6 reconnaissance versions, and 18 Tornado air defense fighters. Saudi Air Force pilots also defended their territory with the Tornadoes. Vertical takeoff and landing Harriers. The only Western fighter with this capability flew during Farnborough. A modified version of the airplane, the AV-8B, built by McDonnell Douglas and operated by U.S. Marine aviators, would soon be lifting off desert roads to handle close-in attacks on Iraq's troops and armor. McDonnell Douglas CF-18s, operated by Canadian forces, shown at Farnborough and the previous year's Paris show, would aid in maintaining air superiority and protecting ships from attack by Iraqi Mirages. U.S.-operated FA-18s would be tested for the first time in both attack and air combat roles. In 1989, night fighter versions of the single-seat airplane went into operation. Its extremely sophisticated computerized flight control system adapts to the selected mission to enhance tracking for ground attack and maneuverability for air combat. General Dynamics F-16s, the lightweight single-engine fighter that was the ultimate in new technology when introduced into Air Force service in the 1970s, was a regular on the airshow circuit. Soon, the single-seat, single-engine fighter would be using its capabilities to go after ground targets and carry on the search for Iraq's elusive mobile Scud missile launchers. Farnborough's Airpower displays gave a glimpse of the future, but a future that certainly no one could have predicted at the time. Airplanes that had been the staples of airshow displays for a decade or more, now massed for war in the late summer and fall of 1990. The fighters, bombers, strike aircraft, helicopters, support personnel came to the Gulf Theater in an airlift unmatched in speed and volume by any in history. Carriers steamed to the area. Naval air squadrons intensified their exercises. About 40 different types of coalition aircraft totaling over 2,000 were assembled and prepared for battle. A battle that would later earn the nickname Baghdad International Air Show. In early January 1991, the U.S. Congress cleared the way for President Bush to declare war on Iraq. And on January 17th, just before sunrise, F-117s and F-15s, combined with hundreds of other coalition aircraft, set off to liberate Kuwait. Air superiority was achieved in the first few days. After 38 days of bombardment, Airpower had achieved its objective. But there was still a job to do, and the question of when to send in the ground forces had to be answered.
There's a lot been written on that and a lot been said, but it boils down to a very simple fact, and that is General Horner and I promised General Schwarzkopf that before any soldier crossed the border of Iraq, that air would attrit the land forces of Iraq by 50% in 3 critical areas: people, artillery, and tanks. Our projections had shown, based on the modeling that we had done, that that should take between 4 and 6 weeks with reasonably good weather. And as history shows, that's about what it took. We were a little behind the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then we caught up near the end. And so that's why that I'm sure that General Schwarzkopf would tell you that he made the decision to start the land campaign with the President's approval when he did. But he was in control, he was the sink, and if he had needed to wait longer, he would have waited longer. Because one thing that was paramount in his vision throughout the entire war was the minimum number of casualties on the American side that he could possibly have.
Ground forces moved, and moved quickly. And in 100 hours, it was all over. Air power contributed to a decisive victory as it had never done. Victory parades honored the troops. But the air shows honored the pilots and airplanes of Desert Storm. At a post-war air show in Topeka, Kansas, the most productive fighter of Desert Storm, the F-15 Eagle gave the crowd a first-hand look at what made it so lethal to Iraqi MiG and Mirage pilots. Major Frank Gorenk flew the aircraft through a grueling flight routine, displaying the aircraft's agility and power. The first maneuver you'll see is a 4-point roll. The next maneuver is a high G-tight 360-degree 8G turn. The F-15 showed off its roll capabilities. All current generation fighters perform tight rolls and turns at air shows, but the F-15 is the only one that performs this maneuver. A high-speed climb from 500 to 18,000 feet in less than 25 seconds. Ironically, the F-15 was sharing the stage at Topeka with the Soviet MiG-29, Iraq's frontline fighter. Aviation Week captured this rare night flight rehearsal of the Soviet fighter. In need of hard currency from export sales, the Soviets operated business as usual on the air show circuit. In fact, at the Topeka show, you could buy a ride in the MiG-29 for $10,000. The 1991 Paris Air Show proved to be a major victory celebration for coalition aircraft, which assembled in an unprecedented display of war-winning air power and modern technology. All the U.S. Desert Storm aircraft flew in for the show, as well as British Tornadoes and Jaguars and French Mirages. French President François Mitterrand and dignitaries came to view the star of the show, the Lockheed F-117A stealth fighter. At the few shows at which it had appeared the previous year, It stood out for only its angular shape and mysterious mission. Now, it was a war hero and known throughout the world.
And we think this is a great opportunity to take representative aircraft that participated, represented American aircraft, and not only Air Force, but Navy and Army as well, to come to this air show and show what American technology and the American military were able to field and use so effectively. It's a great story, and we're glad to be able to tell it.
The Paris show for 1991 took on a tone and style different in many ways from the previous 38 Paris aviation events. The Patriot missile, with its record of Scud missile intercepts during the Gulf War, was a major attraction at Paris. However, aerospace industries were generally slumping, and the onset of war in January had caused some participants to scale back their presence. And the show saw dramatic reductions in the amount and type of flying displays. Few military aircraft took to the skies. Cost was certainly a factor, but most observers concluded that military flying displays at Paris wouldn't mean much compared to the flying and technology displays put on 4 months earlier and televised worldwide from over Iraq and Kuwait. Still, in the exhibitors' chalets and on the trade show floor, visitors explored aircraft design advances with special attention to the lessons learned from the Gulf War. One of the hottest fighters at Paris '91 was the Rafale C, Dassault Brigade's twin-jet single-seat aircraft intended to go into service for the French Navy and Air Force later this decade. The dark gray camouflage C model prototype had first flown a month earlier. Its predecessor, a Rafale A technology demonstrator, had been flying at international shows since 1986. Its full fly-by-wire technology and canard wings gave it agility unseen before in show displays. Now it was the C model's turn. Production versions will have 2 engines delivering about 20,000 pounds of thrust each. The French Navy will get 86 Rafales starting in 1996. And the French Air Force will ultimately be flying 250 of them, with first delivery scheduled for 1997. The Black Rafale, as it was called, certainly earned the crowd's attention. Two years earlier at Paris, Lockheed's SR-71 became the focus of attention. Although the Blackbird had flown for over 25 years as a reconnaissance airplane, the Paris 1989 air show marked the first time this airplane was presented internationally. The Blackbird flew faster and higher than all others and incorporated all the basic elements of stealth technology. Now, in 1991, Lockheed's F-117A took the stage at the Paris Air Show. Just 3 months before the 1991 Paris show, the Air Force had selected the winner of the Advanced Tactical Fighter competition, and Lockheed won the contract for the next generation fighter. They would build the airplane in a consortium with General Dynamics and Boeing. Their new airplane is designated the F-22. Jack Gordon is Executive Vice President of Lockheed's Advanced Development Company, which for 40 years has been known as the Skunk Works.
The YF-22 will be a revolutionary outgrowth of the F-117 technology for a similar signature characteristic or set of characteristics. We will now have the capability of making very high performance airplanes. The F-22 will have the ability to supercruise, that is, not use an afterburner in order to achieve supersonic flight. It has an agility that is just going to be unprecedented. During our prototype phase, we demonstrated in excess of 65 degrees angle of attack and still had the airplane under total control. So I think that's going to give the the combat pilot an edge that he's never had in the past, a corner of the envelope that has been unprecedented.
Also at Paris, a Boeing Sikorsky technology demonstrator based on an S-76 took the stage. It's the predecessor for the new U.S. Army light attack helicopter, the LHX. It will be called the Comanche. The Comanche design, selected over the Bell McDonnell Douglas design, features an enclosed tail rotor. That fantail design is incorporated in the S-76 demonstrator and was flown at Paris by Sikorsky test pilot Nick Lapis.
We built this fantail demonstrator to explore the concepts for the fantail. Among them are maneuverability and agility, but of course it includes low acoustic signature. In applications in advanced military helicopters where detection is extremely important, both acoustics and radar signatures become a dominant part of the design. And so the fantail has been designed to be extremely quiet and also have a very low radar signature. Another feature of the fantail is its extreme protection against damage from trees. Both the shroud and the toughness of the blades allows the fantail to be used in a nap-of-the-earth environment, close to obstructions and close to hazards that otherwise would damage a tail rotor. Here at the Paris Airshow, we're conducting a 4-minute demonstration for the crowd. And in that demonstration, we're showing some of the capabilities of the fantail with regard to its maneuvering. For example, the fantail has a thrust to allow the machine to turn 180 degrees while traveling at 80 knots, and to turn 90 degrees and point at targets while traveling as fast as 110 knots. This gives us an advantage over conventional helicopters, which we can turn much faster and point much faster, usually turning and pointing weapons in about half the time of a conventional helicopter. What we would want to do is have the crowd see us maneuver and recognize that if this machine maneuvers this way, then when Comanche comes down the pike in about 3 years, they'll see a machine that even has more maneuverability yet.
Of course, it was business as usual at Paris. Airbus industry, with its A300 commercial airliner introduced at Farnborough in 1986, was concluding a deal with Federal Express for the sale of 25 freighter versions. In 1986, Airbus first demonstrated the computerized fly-by-wire airplane to the public and showed slow flight maneuverability and capability to be handled adeptly by a 2-pilot crew. And the Soviets came again. Their unique jet-powered amphibious transport, the A-40 Albatross, came in prototype form. It is to be built as an anti-submarine and rescue aircraft for the Soviet Navy. The MiG-31 was seen at Paris in 1991 and the West for the first time. Codenamed Foxhound, it sports the largest radar of any Soviet combat aircraft. Valery Manitsky, chief test pilot, explained the radar capabilities to Aviation Week editors.
Information display.
It can track 10 targets at the same time and can work in tandem with radars in other MiG-31s. The airplane evolved during the late 1970s as a high-speed interceptor to protect Soviet air sovereignty from incoming supersonic bombers, primarily the US B-1 bomber, which flew at Paris in 1987 and has been seen on the airshow circuit regularly since that time. Toward the end of the Paris show, Chief Test Pilot Manitsky took the 75-foot-long interceptor through its paces over Le Bourget Airport. Outfitted for combat, the airplane, which some experts say can fly at near Mach 3, takes off at a weight of over 100,000 pounds. Although U.S. manufacturers did not fly their high-tech military planes at Paris 91, they are continuously refining existing models and developing new aircraft enhanced with the latest technology. These planes are sure to be future attractions on the air show circuit. The F-14D, the latest version of Grumman's swing-wing interceptor. This carrier-based Navy airplane has new GE engines for roughly 40% more thrust than that of the original F-14A models. Also, the D model has the latest in long-range targeting radar, electronic countermeasures capability, and all new digital avionics to make it the Navy's most advanced fighter. Also, with agility in mind, an F-15 has been highly modified by McDonnell Douglas. This one-of-a-kind airplane, a technology demonstrator for short takeoff and landing and extra maneuverability, sports a canard wing up front for greater high-angle capability. But its most notable features are Pratt & Whitney engines with 2D nozzles designed to change the direction of thrust. The unusual degree of agility in flight is intended to give the pilot of such a fighter the decisive edge in air combat. These new features can combine effects to give the F-15 demonstrator capability to take off and land within 1,500 feet. The X-31 is a Rockwell MBB lightweight fighter concept that explores newfound engine and aerodynamic concepts for extraordinary agility. The first one rolled out in March of 1990 and began its test flights 6 months later. It can cruise at Mach 1.3, but is designed to have an exceptional degree of control at low speeds. The extra maneuverability comes from thrust vectoring paddles in the jet exhaust, which can accomplish dramatic course reversals. And perhaps we'll soon see in public Northrop's flying wing design stealth bomber, the B-2. Its roots are a Northrop flying wing design from 40 years earlier. But the B-2, with 4 jet engines, features the materials and design to minimize its radar signature. It's intended as a long-range bomber carrying conventional or nuclear weapons. Its cost has made it controversial, and final production plans are questionable. But in light of the invulnerability of stealth fighters over Baghdad, the Air Force is convinced more than ever that this stealthy bomber is one for the 21st century. No one yet knows whether the B-2 will join the Air Force fleet and become a regular at future air shows. With the upheaval in world politics, particularly in the Soviet Union, with superpower threats diminishing and the Third World in turmoil, the impact on future roles and designs of aircraft will surely be felt. But in the meantime, air shows remain a place of joy and excitement for millions of spectators every year, and a window on the future of aviation.